The quiet came easily in the early hours, the kind that settled over a house before the day decided what it wanted to be. Ronan Mercer liked that hour. At 53, he'd earned the right to slow mornings and strong coffee. The walls of his modest home outside Clearwater Bay, a weathered coastal town in the Pacific Northwest, held no trophies, no medals, no reminders of what he'd done for most of his life. That was intentional. He folded the newspaper with deliberate care, the ocean fog pressing against the windows like a held breath. Retirement had taught him routines that didn't require weapons or radios or code words whispered through static. Gardening, wood repair, coffee poured twice, never rushed. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe the channel and let me know in the comments where are you watching from. It helps more than you know. The phone rang just as he reached for the mug. Ronan didn't flinch. He hadn't jumped at sudden sounds in decades, but something about the timing made his fingers still. The voice on the other end was not calm. "Dad," his son said, "I need you to come get me." There was a pause. Not long. Just enough for Ronan to hear the lie forming. "Where are you?" he asked. Another pause. Longer this time. "St. Alden Medical." The mug stayed on the counter. Ronan was already reaching for his keys. The drive inland took just under an hour, the coastal road giving way to industrial sprawl and concrete overpasses. Clearwater Bay disappeared in the rearview mirror, replaced by a city that pretended to sleep while it sharpened its knives. St. Alden's emergency wing smelled like antiseptic and quiet panic. Ronan spotted his son immediately. Micah Mercer sat on the edge of a gurney, shirt torn at the collar, knuckles wrapped in gauze already soaked through. His right eye was swollen nearly shut. A thin cut traced his cheekbone, stitched hastily by a tired resident who'd seen worse and said less. Ronan didn't ask questions yet. He checked Micah's pupils, jaw alignment, hands, ribs. The old habit surfaced without permission. "Who did this?" Ronan asked, voice level. Micah shook his head too quickly. "It's not what it looks like." Ronan exhaled through his nose. "Try again." A nurse glanced over, then looked away. People learned when not to interrupt certain conversations. "It was a meeting," Micah said. "I went with a friend. He thought I could help negotiate a supply dispute." Ronan's eyes flicked up. "You're an independent logistics consultant, not a negotiator." Micah swallowed. "I didn't know who it was." There it was. Ronan sat in the chair beside him, elbows resting on his knees. "Say it slowly." Micah hesitated, then said, "It was Anton Rourke." The name landed like a body hitting water. Anton Rourke ran half the docks along the northern coast. Freight, gambling, smuggling that didn't exist on paper. The kind of man who wore tailored jackets and never raised his voice. "And what," Ronan asked, "did Rourke want from you?" Micah's good eye flicked toward the curtain. He wanted to make an example. Silence filled the space between them. Heavy, familiar. "He said I spoke out of turn," Micah continued. "Said I embarrassed him in front of his people." Ronan nodded once. "And then?" Micah's voice dropped. "Then he hit me. Himself. Told me I should be grateful he stopped there." Ronan stood. The movement was subtle, but something in the air shifted. The nurse at the desk glanced up again. So did a security guard near the door. Ronan placed a hand on Micah's shoulder. "You're staying with me tonight." Micah shook his head. "Dad, you don't understand who he is." Ronan leaned closer, just enough that only Micah could hear him. "I understand exactly who he is. They left the hospital without incident. No one followed them. That didn't mean no one watched. Back at the house, Ronan locked the doors manually. Habit. The kind you don't unlearn." Micah sat at the kitchen table while Ronan cleaned his cuts properly. The silence stretched, broken only by the sound of the ocean outside and the careful snap of medical tape. "You never told me what you did," Micah said quietly. Ronan didn't look up. "I told you I worked overseas. You were never home." Ronan met his son's eyes. "That's true," Micah swallowed. "Rourke said something. Before he hit me." "What did he say?" "He said fathers like you always think they're untouchable." Ronan finished taping Micah's hand. He straightened slowly. "That man," Ronan said, "made a mistake tonight." Micah frowned. "Dad?" "Not because he hit you," Ronan continued. "Because he assumed I would accept it." Ronan walked to the hallway, stopping in front of a panel that looked like part of the wall. His fingers rested there for a moment. He didn't open it. Not yet. Outside, the fog thickened, rolling in from the water like a curtain being drawn. Some lives were built on forgetting. Others were built on remembering exactly who you used to be and deciding when to become that person again. This is part one, right? Morning didn't soften anything. Ronan Mercer woke before dawn, the ocean still hidden behind a low gray veil. Micah slept on the couch, breathing unevenly, the painkillers dulling the ache but not the memory. Ronan stood at the kitchen window, hands wrapped around a mug he hadn't touched, watching gulls trace slow circles above the water. He hadn't planned on remembering certain things anymore. Faces, roots, patterns, but memory didn't ask permission. By mid-morning, Ronan was in town. Clearwater Bay survived on fishing boats, seasonal tourists, and freight that moved quietly through secondary docks when no one was watching too closely. Anton Rourke didn't operate from the shadows the way men like him used to. He preferred daylight respectability, charitable foundations, waterfront redevelopment, a name etched into plaques where no one asked questions. Ronan started where questions weren't welcome. He parked 2 streets away from the harbor offices and walked the rest of the distance, moving slowly, deliberately. No hurry, no nerves. Men who rushed made mistakes. The building itself was unremarkable. Glass, steel, and the faint smell of money. Ronan didn't go inside. He didn't need to. The rhythm of security was written on the outside if you knew how to read it. 2 guards at the entrance. One older, one too young. Cameras angled wide, leaving blind spots that suggested confidence rather than care. Confidence bred laziness. Ronan noted everything, then kept walking. He spent the afternoon doing what looked like nothing. Coffee at a dockside cafe, a stroll along the pier, a conversation with an old shipwright who complained about fuel prices and never once asked Ronan's name. By evening, Ronan knew enough. Rourke held court that night at a private dining club farther inland, a place with no sign and no reservations, where deals were made over heavy glasses and heavier silence. Ronan didn't go there either. Instead, he went home and opened the wall. The panel slid aside without a sound. Behind it sat a narrow steel cabinet, sealed, untouched for years. Inside were things Ronan had promised himself he'd never need again. Tools designed for precision, not rage. He didn't take everything. He never did. Micah woke just as Ronan finished packing a small bag. "You're not just going to talk to him," Micah said. Ronan paused. "No." Micah sat up carefully. "Dad, whatever you think you're doing." Ronan met his eyes. "You were beaten to prove a point," Micah swallowed. "Then let it go. That's how these people work." Ronan zipped the bag. "That's how they survive." The man who followed Ronan didn't realize he was doing it. He was young. Clean jacket, earpiece worn badly like a costume. He lingered too long at street corners, mirrored Ronan's pace without understanding how obvious he'd become. Ronan let him trail for 3 blocks. Then Ronan turned. The alley was narrow, damp, and quiet. Ronan moved fast, one hand on the man's wrist, the other on his throat, pinning him against brick before fear had time to bloom. "I'm not here to hurt you," Ronan said calmly. "But I will if you lie." The man nodded, breath shallow. "Who sent you?" "Mr. Rourke," he rasped. "Why?" "To see if you were alone." Ronan tilted his head. "And? You are." Ronan released him and stepped back. "Tell him," Ronan said, "that I don't like being watched." The man didn't wait for permission to leave. That night the call came. Ronan recognized the voice immediately. Smooth, unhurried, practiced. "You have a disciplined son," Anton Rourke said. He didn't scream much. Ronan said nothing. "That kind of restraint usually comes from fathers," Rourke continued. "I assume you're calling because you want an apology." "I'm calling," Ronan replied, "because you misjudged me." A soft laugh. "Everyone says that. You put your hands on my son." "I corrected him." Ronan's voice didn't change. "You don't correct my family." Silence stretched. "Then, come see me tomorrow. We'll straighten this out like adults." "Send an address," Ronan said. Rourke did. Ronan didn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table long after Micah drifted back into uneasy rest, writing nothing, thinking everything. He thought about the years he'd spent dismantling networks that thought themselves untouchable, about men who believed money insulated them from consequence. By morning, Ronan had already made his first move. The docks shut down at noon, a routine inspection triggered by paperwork that suddenly appeared where it shouldn't have existed. Containers delayed, schedules disrupted, insurance alarms quietly ringing in offices far from Clearwater Bay. Rourke would notice. He always did. Ronan drove inland just after dusk, the address burning quietly in his memory. He didn't bring the bag. He didn't need it yet. Some confrontations weren't about force. They were about recognition, about letting a man understand that the world he thought he controlled had seams, weak ones. As Ronan turned off the main road and the city lights fell away, his phone vibrated once. A single message. "We know who you are now." Ronan smiled faintly and kept driving. Because once a man like Anton Rourke started asking questions, the answers had a way of arriving faster than he expected. The place Anton Rourke chose was meant to intimidate. A restored cannery sat alone at the edge of the estuary, all steel beams and polished concrete, the kind of space that whispered power instead of shouting it. Ronan Mercer arrived early, parked where the gravel met the reeds, and waited with the engine off. He counted exits, reflections, the way sound carried across water. Rourke arrived 10 minutes late, exactly as expected. 2 vehicles, dark glass, heavy doors. 4 men stepped out first, spreading with practiced ease. Not professionals. Professionals didn't advertise their awareness. Rourke followed, coat immaculate, expression relaxed. A man used to rooms bending around him. Ronan didn't move until Rourke did. "Mr. Mercer?" Rourke said, smiling as if greeting an old acquaintance. "I appreciate punctuality. I appreciate restraint," Ronan replied. "You showed very little." Rourke chuckled and gestured toward the building. "Shall we talk inside?" "No." The word landed flat. Final. Rourke studied him more closely now. "You're bolder than I expected." Ronan met his gaze. "You're smaller." For the first time, Rourke's smile thinned. They stood in silence, wind moving through tall grass, the estuary breathing behind them. "You shut down one of my docks today," Rourke said. "That wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be." Rourke nodded. "You want compensation." "I want understanding." Rourke raised an eyebrow. "You think I don't understand violence?" Ronan stepped closer. Not threatening. Certain. "I think you understand leverage, but you don't understand consequence." Rourke's eyes flicked to Ronan's hands. Empty. Calm. "You hurt my son," Ronan continued. "You did it personally. That wasn't business." Rourke shrugged. "Men learn lessons different ways." Ronan leaned in just enough. "So do monsters." The air shifted. One of Rourke's men moved his hand slightly. Ronan noticed. Rourke noticed Ronan noticing. "Careful," Rourke said softly. "You're standing very close to something you don't want." Ronan smiled just a little. "You already crossed that line." Rourke studied him for a long moment, then laughed. "You're interesting, Mr. Mercer, but interest fades." He turned away. "Take your son and disappear. That's my generosity." Ronan didn't stop him. He waited until the vehicles pulled away, then exhaled slowly. That meeting wasn't about winning. It was about confirmation. Rourke believed in dominance, in fear, in quick violence followed by long silence. Men like that collapsed when the silence broke. The next strike came quietly. Rourke's accountant vanished for 6 hours. Not kidnapped, not hurt, just absent. When he returned, pale and shaking, he resigned before sunset and boarded a ferry heading south. His files followed a different route. By nightfall, 3 shell companies froze their accounts. A zoning permit stalled. A licensing board asked questions no one wanted answered. Rourke noticed. He always did. The message arrived just before midnight. "You're interfering with things you don't understand." Ronan deleted it and turned off the phone. Micah healed faster than Ronan expected. The bruises faded, but something else settled in their place. "You're not stopping," Micah said one evening, watching his father clean a fishing knife that hadn't seen salt water in years. "No." Micah nodded. "Then let me leave." Ronan looked up. "Where? Anywhere else?" Ronan considered it, then shook his head. "That's what he wants." Micah exhaled. "Dad, I don't need revenge." Ronan's voice softened. "This isn't revenge." "It looks like it." Ronan met his son's eyes. "It's prevention." Rourke struck back 2 nights later. A fire at a storage yard. A warning. Controlled. No casualties. just enough destruction to send a message. Ronan stood at the edge of the cordon, watching flames eat through stacked containers, listening to sirens paint the night with urgency. This time he didn't smile. He went home, opened the cabinet fully, and removed what he'd avoided the first time: the tools of escalation. By dawn, Ronan had traced Rourke's inner circle down to 3 names. One was loyal, one was greedy, one was afraid. He chose the afraid one. The meeting took place in a laundromat that smelled of detergent and desperation. The man talked quickly. Too quickly. Ronan let him. By the time the sun rose, Ronan knew where Rourke kept his real insurance. Not money, not weapons, people. Rourke's empire didn't rest on fear alone. It rested on secrets that could not survive daylight. Ronan drove back toward the coast as the fog lifted, the horizon widening. This was no longer about a warning. It was about collapse. And once a structure began to fail, the fall was never quiet. Ronan Mercer moved before dawn, when decisions felt clean and the world hadn't started lying to itself yet. He drove south along the coast highway, then cut inland where the trees thickened and cell service thinned. Rourke's operation was layered, but it wasn't elegant. It relied on momentum, on the assumption that people would look away once the first warning landed. Ronan had learned long ago that momentum could be reversed, quietly and all at once. The afraid one had talked. Not because Ronan threatened him, but because Ronan listened. Names, roots, a ledger kept in a place that didn't look like a place. A family cabin, inherited and forgotten, sitting above a reservoir where the water ran cold even in summer. Rourke kept his real leverage there. Records, recordings, promises made in rooms without windows. Ronan didn't go straight there. He stopped first at a boatyard outside Greyhaven, a town that pretended not to notice how much freight passed through after dark. He paid cash for fuel he didn't need and asked questions that sounded casual. Men answered without realizing they had. By mid-morning, Ronan knew which of Rourke's captains had started hedging their bets. Fear traveled faster than loyalty. Back home, Micah packed a bag. "I'm going to stay with friends," he said, careful not to frame it as permission. Ronan nodded. "Good." Micah hesitated. "When this is over, will it ever really be over?" Ronan looked at his son for a long moment. "It ends when the choice to hurt you disappears." Micah didn't ask how that would happen. They hugged briefly, the way men did when words were inefficient. The cabin sat above the reservoir like a secret that thought it was safe. Ronan arrived after sunset, parking well away and approaching on foot. No lights, no noise. He moved through trees with the ease of muscle memory, the years falling away without ceremony. Inside, the air smelled of old wood and damp paper. The safe was where the afraid one said it would be, behind a false wall. Simple, arrogant. Ronan didn't rush. He never did. What he found inside wasn't just leverage. It was a map. Names tied to favors, payments disguised as loans, conversations recorded because Rourke liked to relive the moments when people agreed to be owned. Ronan copied what mattered and destroyed what didn't. Fire was efficient that way. As the flames took hold, his phone vibrated once. "You're making this personal," the message read. Ronan typed back a single word: "Always." Rourke reacted badly. By morning, the docks were crawling with unfamiliar men, loud ones, the kind who needed to be seen to feel effective. Rourke wanted a show of strength. He wanted to remind the city who paid for silence. Ronan watched from a distance and counted mistakes. The first came when Rourke moved his son to a penthouse overlooking the river. Protection disguised as privilege. The second came when he pulled trusted people closer, tightening the circle until it choked itself. The third came when he sent a courier. The man found Ronan's house empty. The note left behind was simple: a location, a time, an offer to end things like adults. Ronan smiled without humor. They met in a repurposed rail depot, all exposed brick and polished steel. Rourke stood beneath hanging lights, flanked by men who shifted their weight too often. "You're bleeding me," Rourke said, skipping pleasantries. "And I don't know how." Ronan stepped into the light. "You don't need to know how. You need to know when." Rourke's jaw tightened. "You think you're untouchable." "No," Ronan said. "I think you are." Rourke laughed sharply. "I could end you tonight." Ronan met his eyes. "You could have ended this the night you put your hands on my son." Silence pressed in. Heavy. Unforgiving. "What do you want?" Rourke asked. Ronan's voice didn't rise. "I want your reach broken. I want your people to choose themselves over you. And I want you to understand that the next move costs you more than money." Rourke stared at him, searching for a bluff that wasn't there. "You're not a crusader," Rourke said. "You're a relic." Ronan nodded. "Relics survive." He turned and walked out. No one stopped him. The fallout was immediate. A partner flipped. A shipment vanished. A judge recused himself without explanation. By nightfall, Rourke's name was being said softly in rooms that used to fear it. Ronan returned home after midnight and sat at the kitchen table, the ocean steady and indifferent outside. He didn't feel triumph, only a narrowing of options. Rourke would not accept collapse quietly. Men like that never did. As Ronan stood and reached for the cabinet one final time, he knew the next phase wouldn't be about pressure or exposure. It would be about endings, and whether Rourke chose to face one or create many. Anton Rourke didn't sleep anymore. That was the first thing Ronan Mercer understood when the reports came in. Fragmented, second-hand, stitched together from men who no longer trusted the ground beneath them. Rourke moved locations twice in one night, changed vehicles, fired 2 captains for asking questions he used to welcome. Fear had finally found him. Ronan watched the pattern from a distance, patient as tidework. Panic made men predictable. Predictability was a weakness you could build an ending around. The city felt different now. Not quieter, just thinner. Like a shell cracked just enough to let light through. Businesses that once answered Rourke's calls began sending them to voicemail. Doors opened to other names, other offers. Micah was gone, staying inland with friends who didn't ask why his father never answered calls before dawn. Ronan preferred it that way. Distance reduced variables. The warehouse sat at the edge of the river flats, a forgotten structure from an industry that had moved on. Rourke used it as a pressure valve. Meetings, exchanges, the kind of work that needed space and privacy. Ronan had avoided it until now. He approached after sunset, the sky bruised purple and gray. No sirens, no drama. Just the sound of water sliding past concrete pilings. Inside, the guards were alert. Too alert. That told Ronan everything. He didn't breach. He waited. An hour later, the courier arrived. Alone. Late. Nervous. Ronan intercepted him halfway between the car and the door. "I won't hurt you," Ronan said, holding him steady. "But I need you to deliver something." The man nodded, eyes wide. Ronan handed him a phone. "Give this to Rourke. Tell him it's time." Rourke called within minutes. "Where are you?" he demanded. "Close enough," Ronan replied. "This ends tonight," Rourke said. "You come to me unarmed or I start making examples." Ronan's voice was calm. "You already tried that." Silence crackled across the line. "You think you've won," Rourke said finally. Ronan looked out across the dark water. "No, I think you're out of moves." They met where the river bent, under a bridge that carried traffic that never noticed what passed beneath it. Rourke arrived with fewer men than before. He was learning. Too late. "You cost me everything," Rourke said, stepping forward. His suit was rumpled now, his confidence frayed at the edges. "You built it on borrowed ground," Ronan replied. "It was always going to collapse." Rourke's hand trembled. "You don't know what you've unleashed." Ronan stepped closer. "I spent decades cleaning up what men like you unleashed." Rourke searched his face. "Who are you?" Ronan considered the question. "A father who remembers how this ends." The river roared beneath them, swallowing sound, swallowing history. Rourke laughed once, sharp and broken. "You think killing me fixes this?" Ronan shook his head. "I think removing you lets it fix itself." The men behind Rourke shifted. One stepped back, then another. Rourke saw it happen. His mouth opened, but the words never came. When it was over, the river kept moving. By morning, the city woke to headlines that used words like collapse and investigation. Names surfaced. Phones rang. Doors closed. Ronan returned home as the sun climbed, the ocean calm, unchanged. He made coffee, sat at the table, waited. Some endings were loud. Others were simply final. And as the day stretched on, Ronan knew the last thing Rourke would ever understand was how completely he had already been erased. The ocean looked the same the morning after it ended. Ronan Mercer stood barefoot on the back deck, coffee cooling in his hands, watching the tide roll in and pull away again. No sirens, no helicopters, no sudden knock at the door, just salt air and the distant cry of gulls arguing over nothing that mattered. The city inland was busy dismantling what remained of Anton Rourke's empire. Investigations moved the way they always did once fear stopped protecting the guilty. Quiet at first, then relentless, accounts frozen, properties seized. Men who had once sworn loyalty discovered they preferred immunity. Rourke himself became a footnote, an unresolved disappearance. A man who had finally reached too far and found nothing to hold on to. Ronan didn't follow the coverage. He called Micah instead. "I think it's done," Ronan said. There was a pause on the line. Then Micah exhaled. "I slept through the night." Ronan closed his eyes. "Good." They didn't say more. They didn't need to. Micah came home 3 days later. The bruises had faded, but something stronger had taken their place. A steadiness Ronan recognized, the kind that didn't come from violence but from surviving it. They worked on the house together, fixed a loose step, repainted the fence. Normal things that felt earned. One evening, Micah finally asked, "Were you scared?" Ronan thought about it. "I was careful." Micah nodded. "That's not the same thing." "No," Ronan agreed. "It's better." They sat watching the sun lower into the water, the horizon burning gold and red. Ronan felt the old instincts quiet themselves, not disappear, just rest. Weeks passed. The calls stopped. The looks in town softened. Clearwater Bay returned to pretending it was only what it appeared to be. Boats, tourists, weather reports. Ronan sold the cabinet, not the contents, just the space. He sealed the wall and let it become ordinary again. The tools went where they belonged, out of reach, out of mind. He took on work that made sense now, quiet consulting. Helping people disappear from bad situations without anyone getting hurt. Planning exits instead of entrances. Micah found his footing too. New contracts, better boundaries, a life that didn't orbit fear. One night as they walked the beach under a sky heavy with stars, Micah said, "You didn't have to do all that." Ronan stopped, letting the waves reach his feet. "Yes, I did." Micah studied him. "Would you do it again?" Ronan met his gaze. "For you?" "Every time." Micah smiled. Not because he liked the answer, but because he understood it. The past didn't vanish. It never did. Sometimes Ronan still woke before dawn, listening for sounds that weren't there. Sometimes he scanned crowds out of habit. But the edge dulled with time, replaced by something steadier. Peace, he learned, wasn't the absence of violence. It was the absence of threat. Anton Rourke had taken that from his son. Ronan had taken it back. And when the ocean pulled away each night, leaving the shore clean and unmarked, Ronan allowed himself to believe that some endings really were permanent, not because the world was suddenly kinder, but because the right line had finally been drawn and held. And if you've been listening this far, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. It helps more than you know.